When I started this video, I was just mainly talking about general tips and ideas about starting a sixth form or a college, but now this video is going to be actually just about a specific course, and that's English literature. Of course, there isn't just one type of English literature, so there's lots of different examples and therefore a lot of different specifications. So you may find that this video is really more about AQA English literature, and specifically, I think the Lit A specification of English literature. When I first started my English literature A-level, I was really scared. I wasn't taught GCSE English literature because I was taken out of my English classes because I failed my maths so many times. So I self-taught my GCSE. So when I came to A-level, I was really frightened because people were talking about all these words and different types of narrative and things that I just didn't understand, and it was just really frightening. But really, there was nothing actually to be frightened of. English literature is actually quite a relaxing course in a way. Even though it's a lot of work, you have 2 exams, one per year, and 2 pieces of coursework. And I know the last exam I did was about 2.5 hours, which is really long and very painful. And it's a lot of work. But in the lessons, it was so discussion based, and we were spending time reading and researching so independently that it actually was really enjoyable. I'm sure when you're picking your A-levels, you'll hear from other students who warn you against picking English literature, but I'm telling you, if you like reading, if you've always enjoyed English literature, ignore them. Of course, you may have a very different experience to me. I have no authority. I'm just a person who has studied English literature at A-level, so all I can give you is what helped me. As you know, A-level is a huge step up, and all of your teachers and everybody who kind of guides you will be telling you how much of a step up is and how much you're going to have to work, and that can be very daunting. But don't worry about it, you'll find your way in eventually. I think before you start your A-levels, I'd really suggest that you kind of do some reading just around the canon of English literature. Can I say the canon of English literature? My teachers were constantly saying the canon of English literature. Like Jane Austen and Dickens and Hardy. A-level is obviously a lot harder than GCSE because in GCSE you're often looking at like the story and a little bit of analysis, but in A-level you really have to look at how the story is told and why it's told in that way. There is a lot more emphasis on context, and the context isn't just obviously the time, it's about the writer, but you will also have to look into critics, what critics have done, and theory. And as a person who completely loves literary criticism and literary theory, that was amazing for me. And it also made my A-level a lot more enjoyable because, for example, I have an interest in Marxism and feminism. So being able to apply theories to literature was just really interesting. But I think the main difference between GCSE and A-level is the wider reading. When you're in GCSE, obviously you only have your core texts, that's it, the ones that are set by the teacher. You don't really have to do any of the research. In A-level, that's completely different. You do get a couple of set texts, but not that many, and you really do need to have a wide knowledge of wider reading of all 3 genres, of drama, poetry, and prose. Having a vast knowledge of wider reading enables you to make references and comparisons to other texts in essays. But ultimately, it just widens your understanding of themes that you're perhaps looking at or time periods. Before I start on about specific parts of the course that I did, I'm just going to go through some equipment that I used. The equipment that I used was pretty simple. I've got them all on my lap here, and there's not that many of them. Okay, to start off with, I just used an A4 project book. These are really useful because they have dividers in, and you can get them. This is from Wilkinson's for really cheap. So you can perhaps divide them up into poetry, prose, and drama, and maybe some theory or criticism or critics. That's how I did it. And also just get A4 paper because you'll be wanting to make notes as you do in every lesson and as you did in GCSE. I actually never used a ring binder or a lever arch file thing because I just didn't need them. I used these, I don't know what these are called. This, all it is, it's a book and it just has plastic wallets inside and it's attached just, I guess, by glue. And these are really useful, and I would actually suggest these a lot more than ALevel Arch file, because, for example, this is when I was studying First World War, which was my AS kind of subject. We had to have an anthology called the Oxford Book of War Poetry. It's too big. It has to cover my face. And it was really easy because I could put all my work in here, all the poetry, but also other extracts that I found, and I would just be able to flick and see what I've been writing. Everything would be protected. And throughout my years at A-level, I had several of these, and they just did the job because I was able to keep my essays and everything. As well as using A4 paper, I would definitely suggest that you buy like a pack of A3 papers, this A3 size, yeah, because when I was doing my revision and I did a big piece of these for each genre, and it was really useful because everything was on this page and it was just really easy to see, and they're great for doing brainstorms on and things. One thing that you definitely need is a reading log. This was so useful to me. Every time I read a book or a poem or an extract or a piece of drama, I would write it in, and I would kind of write key quotations, especially when it came to my exams. I really did just need to memorise quotes. Highlighters, because you're going to have to highlight an awful lot of text. These post-it note things, the thin ones, post-it notes I think you will need anyway, but these are thin. Basically when you're annotating a book, just put these down in certain sections, or maybe write a little bit about a certain bit of the text, because when I was doing my coursework and I had to study plays and novels, because that was what my coursework was on, they were really, really useful and they stood out. And my friends were really organised. I wasn't as organised as them because they had certain meanings for each colour. I would also suggest getting a subscription to a thing called the English Review, because it has really, really good analysis on text. For example, this one is about the female consciousness in the Age of Innocence, and it's just really relevant for practically anything that you want to study. I think they come out monthly, and they will focus on different themes and different texts, and it was always really interesting to read. So I would definitely suggest your local library or your school library to get a subscription of these, or your English teacher. I used mine at my school library. They're really useful to just get guidance about exams and kind of writing and everything like that. But also looking at texts and critics, and they were just brilliant. Learn your way around your exam board's website, because I don't think I used the AQA website enough. I didn't do as many past papers as I think I should have done, and that would have given me an awful lot more confidence. We did an awful lot in school, but I didn't do any really in my spare time, which I should have done. But really look at past papers. Out of all the books I read, these three are the most important. These are extract books, and you can buy them for pretty much, I think, any literature course for A-level. They're fantastic. This one is The Literature of Love by Cambridge. The Truth About Love also by Cambridge, the Cambridge Collections Advanced edition, and Love Through the Ages, which is an Oxford student text. These are worth their weight in gold. These extract books include poetry, prose and drama, so they don't have any theory or anything like that, but they're absolutely brilliant. You will only really need these books in your second year of A-level, because in your second year you actually have to cover much more literature across the ages, across time. So these have anything from Chaucer to Ian McEwan. There's just a lot of stuff in here. But I think actually I went back to reading extracts a lot more than I did full text, because you've only really got one academic year to do your A2 level, and you honestly don't have that much time to read that many full novels, or I certainly didn't. So having an extract book and just getting so much knowledge really quickly is really useful. And in my AS levels, I did the literature of the First World War. I wasn't so sure about the literature of the First World War, but actually the literature that I actually studied just changed my perspective completely, and has probably been the most, not life-changing, but really made me think about what is morally right, and how inhumane war can be. For the literature of the First World War, I studied the Oxford Book of War Poetry, and that was for my exam. And I studied 2 dramas and 1 prose for my coursework. I did Sebastian Faulks's Birdsong, and that was an individual piece of coursework. And then my other 2 texts for a different piece of coursework were 2 drama pieces, Blackadder Goes Forth by Ben Elton and Journey's End by R.C. Shelton. For the literature of the First World War, I would definitely suggest one piece of reading, and that is Regeneration by Pat Barker, because that book completely changed my whole way of thinking towards what action is heroic and what action is cowardly, and looking at deserters and looking at people who were called cowards because they refused to fight, and actually how heroic those people were, and it completely changed my perspective. And it was just really, really beautiful. For my ALevels, I didn't work as hard as I should have done. I procrastinated. I actually put off my coursework pretty much until the last couple of weeks. I did really bad. I got a C in it overall, but it was just really horrible. Please don't procrastinate with your coursework. Please plan. Please communicate with your teacher. They're not going to spoon feed you. They're not going to break it down like they often do in GCSE, but they can help you and they can at least listen to you. I think when I was struggling with my coursework, I actually just wanted them to listen to me and for me to get all my ideas out and just to see if they thought that was okay. My A2 course I found a lot more enjoyable because it was throughout the ages, so there was so much more literature that I had never heard of and never really discovered before. I had never read any Chaucer before. We read a lot of Shakespeare and everything. Because love is such a huge topic, you have loads of different themes, from parental love to unrequited love to doomed love. There's just so much in there that can be explored, so you have a lot more freedom, because even though the First World War is really interesting, it's still a pretty small topic, as in even though you have a little bit before the First World War and you have the years after and modern interpretations, it's still quite a small topic. My actual A2 course was the literature of love, which was an exam. The exam was 2.5 hours long, very, very painful. There were 4 unseen texts. There's 2 questions, and so you have 2 unseen texts and in one question, and then another 2 in the other section. The time goes so quickly, and you just have to revise for that, really. There's no way around it. And English is very hard to revise for. You just really have to read. I think maybe that's the best thing about doing an A-level in literature, because that is your main job. That is what you have to do. You have to read. And coursework, I did a Shakespeare study, and I was given 2 set texts. Obviously, you have to have a Shakespeare, and my Shakespeare was Othello, which I had never read before, and it was fantastic. And then I was given A View from the Bridge by Arthur Miller, which was really, really good as well. I think for any play when you're studying at A-level, definitely go on YouTube, because often a lot of productions have been put on by students, and an awful lot of them actually very, very true to the text. Then I got to pick my own third text. My third text was The French Lieutenant's Woman by John Fowle. I chose to kind of take a feminist perspective of the 2 texts, and I wanted to look at how far the female characters were dominated by patriarchy, by both the actual men within the play and by the patriarchal kind of expectations and that society held at the time. One book for my Shakespeare text I found very, very useful was a feminist book by Marilyn French called Shakespeare's Division of Experience, and this is good for any feminist interpretation of Shakespeare, because there's a lot of plays in here by Shakespeare, not just Othello, and it looks at each kind of bit is actually set into a different theme, and all you have to do is obviously just look at the back and find Othello, and you get kind of quotes. Because whenever you do a piece of coursework for A-level, you have to include quotes from critics. I would also suggest maybe buying a study book for the particular text that you're studying, because I know we're studying The French Lieutenant's Woman, because it was more of a modern text. I couldn't actually find that many critics online, and actually by buying this book they actually had critics and quotations and talked about applying different theories to the text, which was really, really useful. I hope this video has been a tiny little bit helpful. I know it's just been my experiences and what I found helpful and how I kind of went about doing my course, but I think I was really nervous about starting my A-level, so maybe one of you out there that is a tiny bit scared might watch this and feel okay, because it's going to be fine, because you're going to have 2 years of reading and discussion, and hopefully you will develop as a reader.